Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Promo Perspectives Podcast. It's the podcast presented by Sage, dedicated to giving promotional product suppliers and distributors tips, tricks, and insights to help them grow their business. I'm Gabe Gotay, Senior Marketing Coordinator here at Sage, host of the podcast, and we are back. I'm here with Patrick Harvot, Distributor Sales Team Lead, and we are continuing our series on fulfillment. Patrick, welcome back to the show.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I mean, I feel like a co-host now. You've had me so many times. So
that's right. You've definitely surpassed all the guests in terms of frequency of appearance, and we're going to have you again in a couple of months. Little sneak peek there. So yeah, I would say co-host at this point.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
So far in the series, Patrick and I, we kicked this off with our live stream last month, and that was just him and I talking generally about how and why you would use a store to improve your fulfillment process, common pitfalls, things you can figure out ahead of time to make that whole fulfillment process easier. We just put out an episode where we had guests Jill Houston and Michael Barber from Corporate Pride, and they had a really interesting story where they did two kinds of different stores. They use showrooms and stores, and Michael owns a 3PL warehousing company, which also opened up a whole really interesting can of worms there. But today we are going to be showing an interview that Patrick and I did with Jack Meese from Print One. He's another distributor, and we think he is just about the best standard template for how and why people use a store for fulfillment.
Yep,
right?
I would agree.
So to kick it off, we're going to have Jack introduce himself and tell us a little bit about how and why he started using stores.
My name's Jack Meese. I'm with Print One Inc. in Lenoir City, Tennessee. I'm the sales manager here, and I'm very happy to be here and to talk about how we've utilized the Sage websites. In the past, we had to go through Excel spreadsheets, PowerPoint presentations, have whole order lists. When we have been doing this process over several years, and once Sage came to us and showed us the process, I started showing it to the clients to make it easier for them, and it was a no-brainer. They jumped on it right away. They realized it would relieve them of a lot of steps and a lot of work. What we've learned is if we're doing special events, clubs with universities, smaller corporations, or even bigger corporations, that we usually keep a site open through Sage anywhere from 2 weeks to 2 months. And it has been beneficial in that it has streamlined our processes. It has made it easier on our clients, which they love. And it's just been an overall much better process for all of us.
I think what makes that kind of the standard example is what he was talking about, how he was doing it before with spreadsheets, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's the quintessential, I always say, like company store opportunity, right? The kitchen sheet, the order sheet, managing spreadsheets. There's moving parts between yourself and your customer. So one thing I really like that he pointed out is it just kind of streamlines that whole process, right? It eliminates all those moving parts, the abilities where someone could possibly make a mistake, maybe forget a size or a color even. So yeah, I mean, I would say that's easily the quintessential store opportunity, right? So.
Yeah, and like the spreadsheets, like you said, because even internally at Sage, we've told this story before, like if we're getting apparel for if a bunch of us are going out to a trade show, like if we're going out to Expo in January and we need to send something out to get everybody's sizes that they need, way back before we even had the store solution, I know that we were doing the spreadsheet thing, and it gets sent around, people overwrite each other, it's a nightmare. So that's pretty typical. And he also, I think the other thing that was pretty typical there is the kind of customer, like the teams and the programs and how those were open short term. He's going to talk more about some of the different types of stores he has, but I think that's pretty standard. So,
yeah. The pop-up solution is, kind of what we talked about in previous episodes. That's what he's referring to here. It's open for a short period of time to collect those orders. It's probably, I would say, the most common that I see.
Something else we talked about in a previous episode was kind of gathering customer requirements. And, store or no store, really no matter what you do as a business, obviously customer communication is going to be the cornerstone of providing a good service. But something that Jack talks about is communication not only before but throughout. And here's what he said about kind of how that makes it a better process overall.
Before the site goes up, you need to figure out, obviously, what it needs to look like, which is obviously important, but what items go on the site, and then what their time frame is, how long they want it open. I usually communicate with them weekly about how the order process is going, how many carts there is, so they know whether to re-engage with their employees or team members about, hey, this site's going to be open in another week or another month, whatever, get your orders in. So that, and any freight beforehand, any costs, any sales tax, any estimations you can offer them, that's really helpful to them as well. Just even beforehand, and even communicating while the site is up. Many times, what you'll see is as soon as the site goes up, a lot of team members and employees will jump right on it and order their items. And then there might be a cooling off period for a week or 10 days. And the employer will want to blast out another email or communicate to their employees, hey, you have 2 days left or 3 days left, and then you will get another rush at the end of that. But I communicate during the site as well. That way you have a lot of engagement with the team members, employees, and then we all get more orders as well.
It's a double-edged sword there, right? Or, I mean, and both edges are good in this analogy.
Sure.
Like, on one hand, it is good just for setting the customer expectation. Like the example we gave about internally placing orders for trade show apparel, nobody's going to be really upset if there a month or two goes by before they get their apparel after they place the order, because we know it's just an internal employee thing. But if this is for a customer who is like for a team or something like that, you could see that upsetting somebody if it wasn't communicated to them clearly how long it was going to take. And then on the other side, like you said, you can get more business by being more communicative throughout the process while the store's open.
Yeah, and he makes a great point. I mean, this is something that happens all the time, especially in these types of scenarios where we have a order time period of maybe 3 weeks or a full month. Like he said, you get the spurt up front, and then typically again during the last few days. So one thing I can't stress is the store is a link. So surely the company has maybe their own internal newsletter or blasts that go out to employees or updates. I know at least we do. They could include the link there and kind of remind people, hey, get your orders in before the deadline. So I think it's great advice on his part to also keep up with the order process, make sure your customers looped in on where we currently stand, if there is a window of maybe a month or something like that. So that way you're not worrying about things getting missed or people trying to put in late orders, so on and so forth. So
yeah. Well, and so kind of the next step that would be in the fulfillment process from the customer perspective, they think this first step is they order and the second step is it gets shipped to them. But obviously kind of the middle ground there when you're a distributor figuring out your fulfillment process is when do you bring in the product and start putting that together. And before when we talked about there being two kinds of stores, we were normally talking about time frame that the store was open. All of Jack's stores are open for a pretty short period of time, but he still has two kinds of stores that determine when he takes in inventory. We're going to let him explain a little bit about how he chooses when to bring in the inventory.
So in our fulfillment process, usually there is two different sites that we would do. One of the sites would be, let's say it's a club for a university or a hospital, where maybe you have 20 to 50 people ordering, and they will have a 2 or 3 week process. We've communicated with them on the site and through email about this site will be open for 2 weeks. And after 2 weeks, we will gather all your information, consolidate it, and then we will begin producing your items. So they know at the very beginning that it will be, after the site, another 1 to 2 week process, depending on what the items are. That's one way we deal with fulfillment, where we just consolidate all the orders at the end, and then at the end of the site, we tell the client that we're closing the site on X day, make sure that's okay, and then we go from there, where we will finally produce everything after the site's closed. The second way we've done it is items that we have on the shelves here, and where there is a certain either pre-ordered amount that we'll have on our shelves that we can drop ship to the clients immediately at order. And it's the same thing, it's a 2 or 3 week process. But we do talk with the client about where we will need to make sure that we have enough of X item, X shirt, X tumbler, whatever it is, on the shelves, and communicate with them. Usually they will guarantee a certain amount that we go ahead and pre-make before the site goes up, whether it's 1,000 t-shirts or whatever it is, and then it will go from there. So that's the two different ways we fulfill typically.
And that first way he talks about is really what most of our conversations in this series have been about. I know Corporate Pride talked a lot about doing it that way, right?
Yep. Yeah, and it's just, I mean, that's honestly probably the most feasible option for, I would call your standard distributor. A lot of people don't have, warehousing space or even a brick and mortar that they can store all this stuff. So I think where he makes a great point is like setting the expectation, just, letting the customer know, hey, here's the paths we could go, and setting that expectation. So this way, when people are ordering from the store, it's very clear that you're not going to get the product 2 days from now.
Right.
Now, on the other side of the spectrum where, they're actually holding inventory, I think that's also part of the discovery process that we talked about so much in the first episode, where make sure you have an idea of like, hey, how many orders are we expecting here? So this way you can project an inventory count. And he does build up a little later on, some of his suggestions on inventory count, which I think will be beneficial for a lot of those that are exploring that option. But yeah, I mean,
that's part of it, right? Is gathering those requirements can make it easier, both for setting the expectation, seeing how they do it. Like you said, he's going to tell us about how he did it. Later on, we're going to have another episode where we're going to sit down with a supplier from SNS. He has some advice on how to do that too, but let's hear Jack's point of view first.
Typically, when there's a fulfillment where stuff's on the shelves, a lot of times the corporation, typically it's a corporation or a company, will know they have X amount of employees, and maybe it's a 20th year anniversary or a special event they're having where they'll offer something to every employee. So they can pre-order, let's just say it's 1,000 items or 1,000 shirts. They'll be able to forecast, hey, every employee is going to get one of these. And so they'll be able to forecast how many we need to go ahead and make and purchase. And then that way, once the orders start coming in, we can just start drop shipping them to everybody, whether it's their corporate location or banking center or their home. That's another conversation we'll have where, do you want it to send to home? Do you want it to send to their office? That kind of thing. But typically they will know ahead of time pretty close if they're doing fulfillment for items we have on the shelves, they're going to have a pretty close number. I always recommend that they order a little bit more, 5 or 10% more than they're projecting, for 2 reasons. People will be on leave for whatever reason, maternity leave, sick, they didn't or they forgot to order. Sometimes people don't hit submit. So you always need to have some extras on hand. Typically, they will contact us and we can ship it out, or we ship it to a certain corporate location or a person. That's the one thing that's happened. Half the time, they figure out 2-3 weeks later they want more, where then you might just place another order and ship it to one person. So it's usually pretty close, but they always take the extras and they know they're going to use them. They use them for handouts at events or some other function. But I always recommend 5%, 5 to 10%, depending on what the item is, to order extra, because they will utilize them.
I think probably that's one of the most valuable pieces of advice, right? It's just order a little more than you think you're going to need if you're going to go with that model of store where you're going to have the inventory before orders are even actually placed on the store, right?
Yeah, I would agree with him 100% there. I mean, that's great advice. Because again, like he said, that you never know. Someone could be out on leave or on vacation or on maternity leave and they miss the ordering window. Well, now don't sweat it. We have some of this extra count to take care of you at that point. So
now, and that really, I think that only makes sense if you know the customer is going to take those extras, because you as a distributor, you don't really want to be warehousing extra material with a specific person's logo on it, because your only use for that is to sell it to that person, versus if that customer has it on their end. Like we at Sage, we probably follow that same thing. We always order a little bit more than we need, and we've got a closet with just a couple of extras. And when we bring on new hires, we'll give them to those as gifts, and then occasionally we'll clean house and we'll give them out just like on the freebie table.
Right.
They will find a way to use them.
Yeah, and I think with him, his customer pays that inventory up front. So whatever is not ordered goes back to the customer, and that's something people can work into like a contract. And I always recommend, have your customer, if you're going to hold inventory, have your customer pay up front. And to Jack's point, maybe up it or advise maybe we should go 5% or 10% up based on the projection, just so we have that wiggle room. But at the end of the day, you're sending the inventory back to them once the whole ordering process is complete, or I guess the ordering window is finished. Now, for the distributors that and this came up I think in a question in one of our first episodes where, like, let's say you as the distributor, and I wouldn't recommend this, but you as the distributor pays for the inventory up front. That's where you could then work it into like some kind of contract verbiage where whatever doesn't sell, we need to get our at least wholesale or maybe a 10% margin on or something. So there's definitely ways you can work around it. So
at least get back your costs if you end up going that. Again, not recommended.
Exactly. Yeah, not typically recommended. I wouldn't advise that, but there are situations where maybe you do have to work it out in that fashion. But I would for sure have some verbiage in a contract about, making your margin or at least your net back, right?
Yeah. Now, we're going to move on in a second to talk about shipping, because that's where we're kind of back getting into the part that's visible to the customer. But just to kind of recap, I think it is important really to figure out the part that's invisible to the customer, how you're handling when you're getting inventory and how ready it is to go. Because from their perspective, placing the order on the store and getting it shipped, they're always going to be comparing you to Amazon.
Yep.
And you can't be Amazon as a distributor, and they do understand that to a degree. They understand that when it does ship, it might not get there in a day or two. But if that other part of the process that should be invisible to them, the, handling inventory, if you don't manage that well and suddenly it becomes like a waiting period for them, or that becomes visible to them, that's something they're probably not going to be as forgiving of.
Right. I would agree, for sure.
But let's move on and let's see how Jack handles the shipping and delivery process.
When it's time to ship, we typically have two different options. If a client wants it all to go to one location, we will speak with them ahead of time, even ahead of the site, how they would want to do that. We talk to them how they want to handle it. Sometimes it's a flat rate amount, and sometimes they will pay, and we will just bill them after, if it is a consolidated order going to just 1, 2, 3 locations. So that is one way we do it. The second way we do it is we've gone through the Sage site, where you guys have an easy way to set up a couple different ways, whether it's the size of the box, the weight, where it's going when the client checks out in the checkout process. And that Sage site will calculate shipping, whether it's FedEx ground, FedEx next day, or UPS, whatever you want. It will calculate for us, and it's basically, we don't have to do anything. So that's the second way we've done it. It really comes into what the client needs are. And it's very simple. You just talk to them ahead of time how they want the shipping, the freight to be charged, and you can either do it on our own or have it, especially if it goes to 50 different people, then you probably want, Sage to calculate it through the checkout process and things like that.
I think that's the moral of the story, what he said there, right? It's easy if you just have these conversations.
Mm-hmm.
It helps you figure out what the process should be, and it keeps anything from surprising the customer along the way.
Yeah, for sure. Because, more often than not, like event type of orders, what he's referring to, or even like school spirit wear, like typically that's going to be shipped to one central location. You might get in a situation where you're shipping, like he said, 3, 4, 5 different locations where a flat rate could work out. To his point on like individual homes, utilizing our shipping calculators like the FedEx, the UPS, USPS plugins. Granted, it does require you to have some knowledge as far as like container size, weight, units per carton, which not everybody has access to, but that's where, again, partnering with a decorator, they're going to be able to advise you on, what type of box or package that they would use to ship that product. So it is an effective method.
Well, and that's kind of setting us up for what's going to be our next discussion in the next episode, right? Is because I do think overall shipping is one of the hardest things to plan for ahead of time.
Sure.
Like you said, you might know some of those dimensions of the packaging. You might get some of that off of the product information in Sage, but it's going to vary depending on the variations of the product that you select, how much you get. But working with a decorator can be a great thing. Like if you want to work through Sanmar and their PSST program, you can kind of eliminate shipping from the whole equation, or SNS has a similar program, which is going to be what we talk about on the next episode.
Yep.
So before I set that up, just want to say thanks to Jack again for coming on and giving us that interview. Hope it gave you guys some good insights if you already have a store, if you're doing some of those things the same way, or if you're trying to expand. Something that in our last interview where we talked with Michael and Jill about is the best way to grow your business online as a distributor is to move from being an order taker to being a consultant, right? Like, you should be spending your time talking to your customer to figure out the process and not figure out the specifics of the order. That's what the technology is there for.
Let the easy stuff be easy and work and focus your effort on growing the account.
Exactly. All right. Well, so our next episode, we're going to sit down with Nick Marconi from S&S. It's going to be a supplier point of view. We're going to hear about how S&S works, how suppliers handle their end of fulfillment, and then tips that he has from working with so many distributors to help make your process easier, including some information on their decorator program to eliminate shipping from that equation. Mm-hmm. So thanks for joining us on this episode. We've got one more in this series. Look for it wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll see you there.
Thanks so much.